Hello, and let's talk about unemployment in India. Over the past few weeks, we have been reading alarming reports about the massive rise of unemployment in the country. Nearly 50 million short term migrant workers have lost their jobs, and over a million migrant workers are stuck in homes far away from their native places. We saw the visuals of people leaving cities in droves. A recent survey tells us that half of the migrant workers stranded in cities had rations that would last for less than a day. And this is only the tip of the iceberg as the lockdown has been extended. In today's special episode of Let's Talk, journalist Anindya Chakravarti crunches the numbers around unemployment in India. How many people have lost their jobs? What is the nature of this unemployment? How are they coping? He answers these questions and more. Thank you, Anindya, for joining us. So, over the
Thank you,
past few
Prashant.
weeks, we have had some discussions on unemployment. We've seen visuals, of course, people leaving and the kind of
Yeah.
crisis media reports from across the country. But you have been studying this for a couple of weeks. So, could you give us an idea of the dimension of the problem in terms of numbers?
So let's just take the CMI data first. I think NewsClick already did an interview with Mr. Mahesh Vyas of CMI. And the CMI does not essentially publish or make it public. I guess if you have login, then you might be able to get some of their detailed reports. But the data they make public, weekly data, is usually in percentages. Now, I've taken the liberty of converting them into absolute numbers. Therefore, they will be a little off here and there. So let's look at it. 138 crore people is our current population. There's an estimate I'm taking from all the various websites that you get, Worldometer and things like that. These are not accurate estimates, but the average estimate comes to about 138 crore people. We know that about 73% of India's population is above the age of 15, which means that they can work, right? Usually it's taken as 15 to 64 years, but again, if you think about it, not many people are above 65 actually exist in India, and they continue to work because they can't afford to. So 15 plus is what CMI kind of takes as the working population, working age population, not necessarily working. Now, that makes it about 100 crore people can work in India. Only about, in the last 1 year, if you look at CMI's surveys, only between 42 to 44.5% of that population has been actively working or looking for work, which is called the labor force participation rate, which means they're participating in the working process. Doesn't mean they've got jobs, which works out to about 42 to 44.5 crore people. Now compare that to the number of people who vote, right? And that's less than working age population, because if you have to remember that you can vote only after you've crossed 18, and you can work after you've crossed 15. So 90 crore people could have voted. 90 to 91 crore people could have voted in 2019, but only 42 to 44 crore people actually work, right? Which is a very low labor participation rate when one compares to the rest of the world. Usually it is about 2/3 of the working age population either looks for work or is working, which is part of it. In China, it's more than 70%. Now, if I look at the data CMI has released for March 22nd, which is the week before, 20th of March, the week right before the lockdown. So the week ending 20th of March, we have a labor participation rate of about 42.6%. I'm converting them into crores, right? Roughly. So roughly 43 crore people, I'm rounding it off, were looking for work or had work. And out of that, a little more than 39 crore, right? A little more than 39 crore were actually employed. So if you look at the number of people who were looking for work but didn't get it, that was about 3.5 crore Indians on 20th of March. Now, unemployment rate is actually calculated on the basis of the number of people who were looking for work but didn't get it. There are many, many people who have simply given up hope of getting any work because they haven't got it for years. So they are not counted as part of the official unemployment level. So 3.45% works out to a crore, works out to about 8.4%. So the unemployment rate was 8.4%. 12th of April, which is the latest round of survey that CMI has done, the unemployment number of employed people dropped to 27 crore, a little over 27 crore, which means that more than 12 crore people who were working on the right before the lockdown do not have any work in the second week of April. So that is almost nearly 31%. 3 out of every 10 people who had work at the end of March do not have that work. And let us remember that those 10 people who had work were already very low. Already very low. Only 40% of India's working age population, right? So let's look at it. The interesting thing is that when you look at the unemployment rate, the unemployment rate is 24%. Now, as I said, unemployment rate depends on the number of people actively looking for work. The number of people actively looking for work at the end of March was about 43 crore. The number of people who did not have, the number of people who were actively looking for work in the second week of April was less than 36 crore. So 7 crore people stopped looking for work. They just didn't look for work anymore, right? So if you had actually taken the base of March as the labor force participation rate, then the unemployment rate would be much, much higher, because then you'd have to include those 7 crore people who left the labor force altogether, because then it works out to just 27 crore people would have had work. And I have an Excel sheet out here that would have given us a 36% unemployment rate. 36% unemployment rate. It's only because 7 crore people stopped looking for work that the unemployment rate looks 24%. This is probably the highest ever. But in reality, the unemployment rate compared to March is close to 36%, which is just unimaginable, right? Again, we know 40% of Indians get daily wages, right? Another 6% get paid weekly. So 46%, or about half of the people in India who work, get money either weekly or daily, which means that if the lockdown is more than a week, they're not going to have money. Right. So they're going to become unemployment. We know that, right? And unless they're doing essential services, a lot of them are in agriculture, which was not completely shut down. Some of them would have been in minor transport. Some of them working in retail, which is open, in various essential services. So the unemployment is what we are seeing. The interesting point here is that people giving up the participation in labor process altogether, the labor force. That again is because if there's a lockdown, you know you're not going to get work. Right? So if you're a daily worker, you're not going to get it. So you give up. You think, okay, I'm actually not looking for work. Many people have stopped looking for work for another reason, and that is something that you started off with, and which I think is significant. I think many people have left work because they are going home, back to their village, because the government, both the center and states, are giving them something which is almost as much as they earn by working. So, I mean, if you give me what is called dole of various kinds, I would not be doing anything, right? Why would I? I'm not desperate to earn huge amounts of money beyond what I currently do. So if that I could get from the government, I'm not going to work. So I think that is one big reason why people are falling out of the labor force.
Although
labor force altogether.
There's a point here in the sense that what the governments are giving is basically subsistence money. So that's also a reflection of basically what the state of the economy is that they've anyway been earning just subsistence rates anyway.
I think that is the elephant in the room which no one wants to address, which is that when, as middle class people, we look at the footage of people walking for miles on highways, videos, and we feel terrible about it, right? We ignore the fact that that is how people live. I think 20 to 30% of Indians live like that. They do not get food every day. Sometimes they have to skip meals. They live just at bare subsistence level. I'm always reminded of a story that one of my former colleagues in NDTV did from Bihar, where he had gone to interview for the elections. This was during the Bihar elections, to a family, and the entire family was out. And he said that, where have they gone? Have they gone to work? Where are the children? Have they gone to school? It was, no, they're all gone and they were sitting outside the local butcher's shop where entrails and bones and stuff which was being thrown was being collected by people and taken to be cooked for to be eaten. So this is how a large number of people live. Let's look at the census data. Uh, uh, this is again going to be broad figures because we don't exactly have the data, right? Now we know that about currently about we have about 28 to 29 crore households in India. All right, and I'm going to take the data available to us from the census of India in terms of how many families. This is 2011, so I'm assuming taking it to be more or less constant. 38% of families in India have one single earning member, single worker, right? In 2011, in 32% had two members working, 13% had three members, and another 13% had more than four. So about 4% of households had no one working, right? 4% of households. Now, I think that picture has become much, much worse, simply because if I take these numbers, right, and I take that, okay, 38% of households have one single member working, which tells me that about that would amount to 10.8 crore jobs today, right? Another 32% have two people working, that would account for 18.2 crore jobs. Another 13% have three people working, that accounts for 11.1 crore jobs, right? You add this total, which comes to a total of 82%, which leaves out 18% of Indian households. This adds up to more than the number of jobs that we have.
Right.
Right? So it tells us that actually about 20% of Indian households probably do not have any work. No one in those households work. That's a huge number of people.
Exactly.
That is about 4 to 5 crore or more households which have no income. We completely ignore this. We completely, when you look at unemployment, you think that, okay, it's terrible. But we forget that 5 crore or 4 to 5 crore, let me take a conservative number and say 4 crore, and multiply it by the average household size of about 4.9, and you're with 20 crore people in India out of 138 crore have no access to income at all. The only thing they can do is depend on handouts. This is a perpetuation. On the one hand, we say the market is creating aspiration. Yes, it is for 80% of people, 70% of people. 20 to 30% of Indians have no aspirations. They are living at a subsistence level. And when we say give them basic income, we're simply trying to prop up a system which keeps them out.
Right.
That is the point I'm trying to make.
Right. And exactly. So as you say, a lot of unemployment-centric policies have not really addressed this issue either. So it's not.
They don't, yeah.
It's not, say, a wholesome view of how do you sort of bring them into the workforce as much as what can you just give them for.
And when economists and political scientists think that the economy is doing so badly compared to what it was doing earlier, so many people have lost their jobs compared to why do people still vote for Mr. Modi? They forget that all this while there were 15, 16, 20% of Indians who had no work. And if they're given something under PM Kisan, even 6,000 rupees a year, something under Jan Dhan, a free LPG connection, some amount of money through PM Awas Yojana, they will vote.
Exactly.
So this is what, so when you look at the GDP going down, doing terribly, we do not understand that a large section of people have the lowest portion. Even actually, it's worth pointing out here, I'm going to just take 30 seconds more, that even the consumption data that the Modi government shelved and said, oh, this is not correct, right? Actually tells you that consumption has dropped compared to the previous last survey. Tells you one interesting thing, that 30% of the lowest earners, consumers in urban areas in India actually increased their consumption. Although the overall level dropped, the poorest 30% actually increased their consumption. Whereas the top 10% saw a 11% drop in their consumption in rural areas, the bottom 20% saw just a 1% drop. And their consumption actually on various things increased. So we have to understand that there is a systematic attempt to prop up subsistence existence in this country, continue to get consensus built around it,
Right.
so that 30% of Indians continue to be absolutely poor without any aspirations. And that is what needs to be fought.
Thank you so much, Anindya, for talking to us.
Thank you, Prashant.
That's all we have in this episode of Let's Talk. We'll be back on Monday with the latest news developments of the day. Until then, keep watching NewsClick.